One of the biggest complaints I see with modern gaming are titles following trends. There was a time when everyone had to make a Monster Hunter game, then there was the roguelike craze, with the current being Souls-like titles. It made sense. From Software games had an undeniable impact on the industry, and titles like Lies of P found success following in their footsteps. Among the latest to try their hand at this is Slime Heroes. With charming characters, a vast array of combat options, and more, it sounds like a slam dunk. But can it live up to these high expectations? Slime Heroes starts by making a rather confusing choice. As previously mentioned, Thorn Games considers this a Souls-like, yet doesn't disclose who the various difficulties are meant for. Thankfully, an overview can be found in the settings menu under difficulty. To make things easier, here are the 3 difficulties and how they're tuned. While these options are great, as is the ability to freely edit these settings, you probably noticed a massive flaw. None of these options are explained. This makes tailoring the experience to your needs far more difficult than they need to be, especially since they can have an astronomical impact on difficulty. For example, look at how much of a difference enemy attack speed is. At the lowest setting, enemies are kind of a joke, whereas at the fastest setting, it's really not that different in the grand scheme of things. I would just like to know what exactly it's doing, as testing something easier to understand like damage is not quite straightforward. At the point where this footage was created, the lowest damage I would do is 5, with 24 being the midpoint and the highest being 44. So it clearly fluctuates, as the bottom seems to be 25%, with the top hitting 180 or so percent, but it would be much easier to grasp if I was just given a simple metric. By contrast, just look at how much simpler it is to understand Crypt Custodian's assist options. I get straightforward options like double damage or increase life by 3. There's nothing to think about or consider besides whether or not I need these advantages. It is also a shame that normal is considered the default regardless, so it is impossible to reset to easy or hard difficulty once something is changed. For these reasons, I struggle to even consider Slime Heroes a Souls-like game in the first place. Outside of losing gems on death, it's a pretty paint-by-numbers action-adventure game. I mean, it even has an NPC that tells me I can use fire attacks to light a brazier, which obviously melts the ice so I can progress forward. This really isn't criticism either. Everyone needs to learn at some point, but it unfortunately creates the wrong expectations. At least if it were a Souls-like, it would more accurately capture what it's actually doing. Genre criticism aside, the core experience is filled with these unusual choices. One of the most notable is narrative.
Silver succumbed. I did not tell you the truth, I know. I am sorry, little slime. Do what?
Early on, players learn the world is being ravaged by some kind of corruption, which the slowly slime obviously needs to eradicate. It's a fairly generic premise that's filled with reactions one might expect.
A little slime saved me. That's not possible. Or perhaps it is. Truly.
Outside of major moments, such as the boss being summoned, the narrative is pretty optional. I can speak to specific characters to get insight on current problems, or what I should be focusing on in that moment. I can also just ignore them and move on to the next problem. If anything, I wish it was more obvious which dialogue options are worth skipping. They generally match position, so people at the start of a new location focus on world building, whereas those prior to a boss add insight into that character. It would just be better to streamline the whole process, or possibly add some kind of indicator when more important dialogue options exist. As for gameplay, combat feels rather floaty. Weapons generally lack weight, coupled with enemies rarely reacting to attacks. It's the all too familiar trading blows gameplay loop. Over time, a wide array of options are added, however they create new problems. A great example of this problem is the spear weapon. Due to the long range, a number of enemies struggle to close the gap needed to land a blow. It also vastly reduces the difficulty of certain encounters, as it is even easier to dodge incoming attacks. It is also great that weapons can be mixed and matched, though the result is less interesting choices. Not only can I use different weapons for light and heavy attacks, I can even customize my light attack combo. Through this, most disadvantages can be mitigated to the point where it feels bad using less optimal rotations. Skills are in a similar situation. To unlock a skill, players need to kill a specific enemy and get lucky. From there, up to 2 skills can be cast at the same time. I personally like combining a buff with an attack, though any 2 skills can be used together. In addition to a second skill, players are given the option to add an element like fire. Attributes also seem to proc on a single hit, so simply hitting an enemy with a poison ball will do additional damage. As more fins are added to a skill, the cost increases, so there's more of a notable downside, though the high overall cost can discourage investment in the first place. Outside of standard combat encounters are a wide variety of dungeons. While some of these are the tried and true arenas, a good number are centered around teaching players how to effectively utilize a given skill. Most are fairly rudimentary concepts, such as shooting an enemy at range, though the thought is appreciated regardless. Exploration is also more frustrating than it needs to be. Several levels are designed in a way that looks natural, though it isn't always clear where the explorable area ends. Typically, this is resolved by allowing players to pan the camera to the side to see what secrets may await, but Slime Hero utilizes a fixed camera system. Some of this can be mitigated by utilizing the basic map, but it's more of a hassle than it needs to be. Certain design choices were also pretty poor. A great example of this are the lava platforming sections. When they are first encountered, it's shocking how slow it is to progress. Not only does it make for an annoying detour, it encourages players to make mistakes as they attempt to speed things up. Later, there is another section that feels poorly designed. I first encountered the location at the bottom, and using my platforming skills eventually made it to the reward. Shortly after, I noticed a distinct ledge, so I think the intended solution was to just jump on one of them at the end and ride it down. This is great for players that struggle with platforming sections like this, but better design choices wouldn't present the problem in the first place. Finally, I wanted to touch briefly on technical issues. For the most part, this was fine. There were just a few unfortunate choices that don't look particularly well. Examples include bad camera angles, clipping, stuttering from platforms moving in lava, to even some of the platformings overlapping in a way that just looks ugly. Like, it absolutely plays fine, it just doesn't look great. Even basic things like the glasses skins just look terrible. If it isn't clear at this point, I'm not entirely sure how to feel about Slime Heroes. It doesn't lean into the Souls-like aspects enough to make the experience appealing to that group, yet it does just enough to be detrimental to the action-adventure crowd. In a lot of ways, it really is the worst of both worlds, which is a shame because it has a number of interesting ideas that doesn't resonate as a result. So unless you want a quirky action-adventure game with some combat sections that overstay their welcome, this is probably an experience you can skip. Hey, thanks for watching. If you found the video helpful, please consider liking, and for more content, please subscribe.